Recording is on, and in a few seconds, off we go. Well, thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for joining us on a Friday afternoon/evening. We really appreciate that. I know it's the end of the week, but perhaps the topic is exciting and interesting enough for you to stay 45 minutes with us and have you share have us share with you a couple of insights and practical examples that we have prepared for you on our series of AI for EU, and more specifically for public affairs consultancies, public affairs consultants. So warm welcome. Jacques is here with me. Jacques, you might want to say a few words about yourself, but before I hand it over to you, just a quick technical check. Make sure the sound is working, everything is properly set up. Simply refreshing the browser or opening the webinar in a different browser or tab usually fixes the problem if you have any issues with the audio, but normally everything should be very smooth. And with that, over to you, Jacques.
So hello everyone, thank you for joining the session. My name is Jacques Foul. I'm a digital communication consultant, and I do have experience in a public affairs consultancy. So this session is really special to me. So a little bit about me. So we've been working with Andras on a couple events and webinars and workshops surrounding AI. So this is really something I'm passionate about. And hopefully you'll get a lot of helpful insights, tips, and techniques today.
And regarding my background, some of you may know me, and I know many of you have seen the participant list, where I have been in EU affairs for almost 20 years by now. And one of the main projects that I had worked on, or still working on to some degree, is EU careers. So I have a book called Ultimate EU Textbook and a website called EU Training. But I was and have been involved in public affairs and training public affairs, communication, and advocacy professionals for many, many years. So that informs me of the use cases and challenges that I keep hearing could be solved or addressed at least with AI. So that's the approach we're taking. And I forgot to say at the beginning, but I encourage you to use the chat box. So please ask questions throughout, especially those who are here with at the live session. You're more than welcome to ask us questions to the extent that time allows. We are going to address those. But first, so why don't you type in where you are dialing in from, so we have a rough idea of how geographically diverse the audience is today, though I suspect many of you are in Brussels, but immediately we have Alex, who's from London, even sunny Valencia, Bratislava, Lisbon, Amsterdam. Okay, so that is probably more geographically spread out than I would have originally thought. That's wonderful. So let's actually get into the heart of it. And Jacques will say a few words about the resources and services that we have. And many of these are actually free and might be of interest to you.
Sure. So in the past 6 months with Andras, we've been working really hard, training a lot of public affairs and communication consultants and professionals. So that's a little bit more than 100, and hopefully today we're going to be more and more. We also have created custom AI workshops. So the waitlist is open. So these are the workshops where we go a little bit deeper into how to integrate AI in your daily work. So seeing the different use cases, providing some examples, some tools. We've also launched a monthly Substack newsletter about AI in public affairs with some tips, techniques, but also just some stories that are relevant for the public affairs community. And then we are also publishing on a weekly basis, maybe almost daily, AI tips and tricks on LinkedIn. So if you have any questions, if you have any needs when it comes to AI in public affairs, then you can just follow us on LinkedIn and you'll get all the information there.
Okay, and you want to say a few words about the series, or?
Sure. So it's been a long week for both of us with the series, a webinar series with webinars every day. So we had we had a webinar for EU trade associations early on Monday, for NGOs, for EU officials, communication professionals. So this is the last webinar of the week, but then next week we'll come back with another one for MEPs and their assistants. So really long week, but it's been really interesting to gather some insights about these different audiences and also just share some practical tips. It's also important for us to explain what this session will not cover. So we will not go into the details of policy issues or the EU's AI Act, although this is a really key piece of legislation in Europe. We will not go through any examples or tips for AI in AI ethics, although we do think it's really important in terms of bias, in terms of data privacy, in terms of just simply protecting your data. We'll share a couple examples on how to do it, but we're not going to go into details. We're not going to talk about the AI's impact on society and jobs, although we do think that it's going to really transform the way we do work and the way we interact with tools and the way we create value in our communities. And the last one is that we're not going to compare necessarily tools, or we're not going to focus on one tool over another. I think it's a big part of this experimentation, and a big part of these workshops is about, showing you what is possible in the AI space. So hopefully by the end of the session, you'll have a better understanding on what you can do with AI. And one last word in terms of housekeeping. So the recording and a shorter version of the slides will be shared. As I said, we're tool agnostic, so we're not going to favor one tool over another. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and I will have a closer look at them as we go along. And finally, our ambition for today is to spark your curiosity. There's going to be a lot of examples, a lot of use cases, so you can see how you can use AI in your work. The goal is also to encourage experimentation. We want you to try. There's a part of these experimentation that might include failure because AI systems are not always perfect. But the goal here is to improve, to write better prompts, to get better results. So experimentation is really key here, and also to just inspire your ambitions. So there's a lot of things that you might have not used AI for, but today, hopefully you get to see what is feasible, and then hopefully that will inspire you to either create your own systems or simply just improve the way you're using AI tools at the moment. And the first part that we want to share with you was about the best practices when you're using AI. And to kick things off, we wanted to ask you this question. So feel free to type your answer in the chat box. So what challenges have you faced when using AI or ChatGPT in your work? So
just, sorry, Jacques, jump in for a second is very curious to see, because there are many recurring patterns, and many of those can fairly easily be addressed with the right techniques. So back to you.
So we can see already some answers here. So non-updated information, incorrect answers, difficult to tell what's real and what's hallucination. Juniors abusing the tools, wrong sources.
Out of knowledge, yeah.
So it seems to be the lack of accuracy seems to be a big issue here, and probably generic answers. So just boring and boring sort of writing, I would say.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting to see that. I feel like it's a very consistent issue that people have been experiencing with these tools. Maybe a quick first best practice for using AI. This is something that I use. So a lot of times when you're using these AI tools, the answers you get are just not up to par, or simply the AI just is focusing on biases and things like that. So what I do is I go into the custom instructions of ChatGPT, and this is probably something you can do with other tools. And in the settings, you can basically give some very direct instructions as to what kind of answers you want from these systems. So, for example, I say that I value accuracy, clarity, and respect in all interactions. I want the system to minimize bias and avoid harmful stereotypes. You can also give ChatGPT some instructions in terms of the tone of voice or the type of answers you want, the format of the answers too, if you prefer bullet points over paragraphs. So simply by going into the instructions, the custom instructions, you can direct AI for every interaction you will have moving forward. This allows you to avoid having to do that every single time when you're prompting it. And usually you will get better answers when you do that. So this is really something key to look into when it comes to the settings, so you can improve the results you're getting with AI. And a second best practice is regarding data privacy. So obviously we usually have two recommendations when it comes to data privacy. Is first to avoid sharing sensitive data, so anything like emails or personal data. And the second one is to also go into the settings and the data control settings and to make sure that the system is not training its model based on your data. So this is something that you can easily switch on or off depending on your need. You can keep it off, and this allows you to protect your data, to make sure that basically AI is not being trained with the data that you provide. So obviously this is not something that works 100%. This is not something that we've triple checked, but this is something that is available in the settings. So we would recommend you also do it. Over to you.
Thank you. So I think with those baseline ideas in place, I'd like to take it a step further before we look at the very specific ideas and use cases that we'd like to propose to you to consider or to apply. And this is a brainchild of mine, non-scientific, though I gave it the name Maslow Pyramid of AI GPTUs, the way I think about it and the way I perceive it. And on a very basic baseline level, you can do a lot of fun and entertainment with. You can put in the commissioner designate's mission letter, and you can say, well, turn that into a fairy tale that's adapted to a French audience, right? A lot of fun, and it will do a great job, but it's utterly useless for business or more serious use cases. On a more serious level, though, when you can do a lot of simple task automation, you can do proofreading, you can do summarization, which many people have already tried. Many of you, I'm certain you are already using that, though I'll give you a couple of pointers and a couple of ideas how you can take it to the next level. Another one is to take that, again, yet further, is to optimize workflows. And I say cross-posting, for instance, if you have certain communication roles where you post something on LinkedIn, but you can build in a relay in between, cross-posting that to say on another channel, whether it's on X, whether it's on Blue Sky, whether it's on any other. Then you can build in an AI relay where you say, okay, adapt that to a different audience, or social media or website, turning a policy paper into an FAQ and similar transformational activity, or automated transcription of parliamentary hearings or parliamentary meetings, or any other publicly available video or other tool. And I know that we have among the attendees some authors of different software ventures and startups who are dealing with that on a more systematic and software as a service basis. What you can personally do, and in your team you can do really well using GPTs, brainstorming, perhaps overlaying different inputs. So using different background documents and harnessing the power of GPT and AI to analyze this in a more structured manner. So in a much more qualitative manner than otherwise you may have thought about. Or doing multi-step or chain of thought, as they call it in the profession, multi-step creation. And again, I'll show you a couple examples that I trust will be interesting and relevant to your work. And then ultimately, there are a lot of custom applications, and many of these are directly available online or through subscriptions. Many are free, but these are typically dedicated ways of using AI for specific tasks. And you can also create custom chatbots. So if as a company, as an organization, as a public affairs consultancy, you can create, even using maybe a GPT Teams subscription, and then you can share a knowledge base where you can upload certain templates or briefing templates or background documents, and you can easily pull information from it. And if you're really ambitious, you can even think about creating custom apps for very specific use cases that your client or your company has. Now, having said that, and if my clicker will comply, then what you can try, or what you may wish to try, is, so Google came out with this pretty cool tool called Notebook LM that many people are playing with it these days for, well, I'll tell you why, mostly for two reasons. But the first, more concrete reason, is that it's able to handle a lot of large documents or PDFs. Typically, ChatGPT is not as powerful, at least not at this point in time, when it comes to documents or PDFs that are 20, 30 page and longer. So relatively small documents, pretty good, but you feed it the AI Act, you feed it the Draghi reports, the main version, so to say, the 400-page plus version, it's not going to be able to process it to such depth as you may want it. Though, and this one from Google, this seems to work pretty well. You need to have a Google account, but this is a free tool. They say it's experimental, as you can see. And you can interact a lot with the documents inside. So you can feed that into, for instance, feed the commissioner designate's mission letters, like I did here to try it. And that's what brings me to the second use case. It can generate a podcast interview from the content. So a lot of people have played with it. I played with it. I posted about it. You can check it out on the Influence Builder's website. And it generates a very lifelike conversation between two people about the content. Now, again, it's not necessarily a very practical use case. What's more interesting is the knowledge base and interacting with the data inside. But this is something to play with, to experiment with, and discover. And then I wanted to show you something that I have worked with, I am working with as a project. We built a prototype of a tool where we created virtual personas to create virtual focus groups, where we can do message testing, when we can even put a policy document or a position paper, and to see how a virtual persona who has characteristics that we've created, psychological, demographic, political views are built, and to say, okay, how would this person react to this particular position? And this is built for consultancies and consultants here, where I can define who the client is. It's an association or other. I can feed in a slogan, I can feed in a document, and then basically throw it at the person or multiple persons that we've created, and hear from first person singular what they think about that. And they give recommendations how my position could be reframed or presented in a different way that it's going to resonate. It's to showcase that it's possible harnessing the power of the tool. But before we look at very practical, very actionable ways of prompting and overcoming some of the frustrations that you have mentioned in the chat box, which, as far as I recall, was about it's not, the facts are just not right, or it hallucinates, or it's very bland, very recognizable writing. The style is very recognizable. Oh yeah, it was written by ChatGPT. And I'm assuming that one of you who commented there that juniors abusing it, there was a comment, something along those lines. I'm assuming that referred to CVs and especially cover letters, which were auto-generated, or not auto, but generated by GPT, and they didn't bother to refine it or make it better quality. So please put in the chat box if you have ideas or desires or understanding of where GPT and more broadly AI tools can help you solve a work challenge. So please put that in the chat box and see whether we're going to address it right now or how realistic that is. So issue analysis and research. Yeah, I have an example along those lines. Extract the main points from the Draghi report. Okay, so that was probably an example that resonated with you. Summarizing log documents, analyzing amendments. Okay, soundboard for brainstorming. So I have a couple examples along those lines, and let's jump right into it in respect of everyone's time and Friday afternoon. So the first one I'd like to share with you is, well, stakeholder discovery and issue cross-referencing. Now, one thing is very important. GPT and generally the AI tools, they have a certain limited knowledge because they know what they have indexed out there in the web, online, but they don't necessarily have a unique targeted data set that would make their answers and their analysis relevant to your specific case. Now, that can be overcome largely by feeding the right background data to it. And that goes beyond the scope of today's webinar of how exactly to do it best so you get really the best results. But as an idea is you need to feed in the right context for you to get the most relevant, helpful response. Now, having said that, with stakeholder discovery issue cross-referencing, I, just for the sake of example, I said, okay, here's an example, which is not ChatGPT, it's Perplexity. Many of you certainly have heard about it, others may not have. It's a tool, it's called Perplexity.ai. It's a free tool with a premium version, but the free is very powerful already, where it collates, pulls in information from multiple sources. It provides the references, what those sources are, so you can actually check it and be sure that it's a high quality or relevant result or relevant source, and then basically blends that into a helpful response. As always, trust but verify. So be sure that you are conscious of where the information comes from, but it's a very helpful, quick way to get information from multiple sources. So it's different from Google. I'm assuming that Google is going to go to this direction as well, or at least it will offer you a similar service. And to some degree, it already has, but it didn't work out well. So they are reworking it, but these kind of tools are coming in larger numbers. But for this one, who would be the most, and I left B, but who would be the most important stakeholders to authorize psychedelic medicines for PTSD in the EU? Again, I just came up with an example and say who would be the non-obvious ones. And then I got fairly good answers, a little generic, but fairly good answers. And then I fed the same question to ChatGPT, and actually it gave some good pointers about the non-obvious stakeholders. So maybe military and veteran organizations. And maybe that's not something you would have thought about when you're doing a stakeholder mapping for a particular issue. Or perhaps religious groups. You say, well, there could be some relevance there as well. And it's maybe not an idea you would have thought about when thinking about stakeholder mapping. Or bioethics council. So you see those points, which leads me to emphasize an important point. Do not expect perfect final results from these tools. You are there for a reason in the job, but it can give you a lot of new ideas or a perspective you may not have thought about yourself. So that is the greatest benefit there. Use case number 2, prepare meetings or prepare for meetings, events, interviews with defensive points. So defensive point is the following, or what I mean by that, where you say, okay, use GPT as the devil's advocate. So I gave here a pretty realistic scenario and I gave GPT a role. So this is a role prompting. And say, you represent a cobalt producer in the Democratic Republic of Congo that exports significant quantities into the EU, right? And prepare your client for a high-level meeting with DG trade officials. Key points to discuss are attached. So then you can write it down. If it's in a sensitive or data-wise sensitive document, you can just extract or write a couple of bullets in a separate document, which you are comfortable uploading into the system. So there are certain ways where you can sanitize information or turn that into or extract from it the key points, which are not necessarily as sensitive as the original. And you say, okay, I feed that in, and here's a background, a study or some description of the EU DRC trade relations. Analyze the two. So basically put these two together and then be the devil's advocate and see what questions can I expect, what pushback, what criticism can I expect from EU officials. Now, you can see that the prompt itself is pretty complex, right? Like there are multiple steps to it, but the idea behind it is, hey, I give you relevant information so you can help me better. and not just help me in generic terms, but be my trusted advisor who says, hey, you can expect questions about the environmental impact or about sustainability issues and what have you. I actually put that into ChatGPT without the background document. It gave me very interesting perspective. Next one is the very down-to-earth way of using it and automating work processes for efficient workflow. So you as an organization, as a consultancy, as a team, how can you automate workflows? And not just that, but smart meeting transcription. But the meeting transcription is not limited to meetings you have internally, but it could be meetings that the EU institutions or other stakeholders who put it online. So that's publicly available to not just transcribe it, but once it's transcribed, you can do a lot with that content afterwards. And this is just a schematic, more than a flow chart. It's an automation workflow which can be built. So if you're very geeky, look into it. If not, you might want to look for an expert. But this is basically no code automation. And this is a screenshot from make.com, but there's another tool called Zapier, and there are a couple others where a person gave access to presumably not their main Gmail account, but perhaps a functional account or functional inbox. And it's okay, feed the incoming mails are monitored by ChatGPT. It understands the nature of the message, and then it routes it to different places, maybe as a Slack update or Teams update, or logs it in a Notion or a Google Doc, or drafts a reply, doesn't send it, but drafts a reply to say, okay, here's what you could answer to save time on that. So this is a pretty classic automation tool. And now, two tools that I've spoken to those who are developing these. Now I have no commercial relationship with them. I just like the concept that they are working on, which is, one is a Prismos. So basically they do what I just mentioned, the publicly available videos of various European parliamentary meetings. They take the video, or more importantly, the audio part of it, and do a full transcription of that in an automated manner. And then you can work with that content and do a lot more with it. So writing a report, extracting relevant information, it saves you enormous amount of time. Certainly many of you, those who are in more, let's say, have more work experience, let's put it that way, and not referring to anyone's age, but just more experience, may have started your career while you were just watching parliamentary committee meetings and taking notes. And that is often the case. Oh, there is Pepin. So thanks, Pepin, for jumping in. You're the author of this. So, and then another tool, PolicyMate, which monitors the stakeholder consultation page of the European Commission, presumably other institutions, though it's essentially the Commission that has the Have Your Say website with lots of submissions if there's a new initiative. And certainly that's going to be a big thing now with the new Commission almost in place. So going through that, doing a sentiment analysis, doing a certain insight as to what is being said by which industry and which sector, or turning that into a stakeholder analysis. There's a lot you can do with the raw data that you turn that into a different way. Next use case, analyze data to provide high quality insights and spot flaws and compare amendments. So I kind of grouped these together. I didn't put here an example for comparing amendments, but I did an experiment the other day where you basically take, let's say, the Commission's original proposal. So the Commission initiative, and let's say there's already a formal voting sheet, maybe a 4-column voting sheet, or just simply the list of the amendments that have been adopted by the Parliament. And you can take these two PDFs and instruct ChatGPT to say, analyze these two documents and point out the most important changes that the European Parliament has proposed. And so instead of looking at the very technical, the legal details, and that may be necessary if you're really, you need to go fully into it. But in many cases, that's not necessary. You just want to have an extract of the 10 most important points. You can do that. But analyzing data, I wanted to share with you this example I came up with, I downloaded from Eurostat's website an Excel sheet on youth unemployment. And I said, okay, let's see what we can do with it. So I gave the instruction that you see in little font on the screen, carefully analyze the attached sheet about youth unemployment, draw 10 non-obvious insights that will be relevant for an advocacy campaign for a European fashion retailer, right? So we have seemingly quite diverse background information where youth unemployment, fashion retailer, but maybe there's an overlap of employing young people to be store clerks or similar. And another trick that you see here is non-obvious insights, because I could look at it and say, ooh, the unemployment is highest in, or youth unemployment is highest in Spain, perhaps. That would be fairly obvious by looking at the numbers, but I'm looking at something of reading between the lines. So this is what it gave me, just to share with you what the results were. Yeah, like sustained low youth unemployment in the EU 27, Euro area slightly higher youth unemployment. That seemed already a higher level analysis than just simply analyzing the raw numbers. Or let's say strong labor market in Czechia, right? So these are interesting insights, but of course I could direct it in a different way to make it more helpful for my particular use case. And scenario planning with simulated or lookalike audiences. This is where I see an enormous potential, and this can be taken really far. Now, the example I'm going to give you doesn't take it really far, but I hope it will present the concept to you to think about, to play with. And in my hypothetical example, the question I asked here, how would a stakeholder group react to a certain policy initiative, to a certain action or act from EU institutions, for instance? And I said, okay, well, let's take, who would be those the stakeholder groups? Let's say Spanish farmers. Somehow Spain was on my mind. So I said, okay, let's take the Spanish farmers. Now, how much do I know about Spanish farmers? Well, honestly, not much. So I said, okay, I go to Perplexity and create a certain understanding of this particular stakeholder group. So I said, okay, what would be the 10 most typical, in air quotes, characteristics of Spanish farmers? So it listed me pretty good ones, and then it provided me the source from various statistics and academic studies and the like. So to me, it seemed reliable. Again, if this is high stakes, I would check the sources. I would be sure that it's using reliable sources. And then I fed the findings of that answer. So that's the first part you see up there. So consider the following 10 characteristics of Spanish farmers. I pasted the results there. And then I said, okay, anticipate and let me know how such a group would react to a zero tariff olive import from Morocco. My hypothetical scenario, but pretty concrete to simulate with. And then it gave me, again, without being a very, or any kind of expert on this particular topic, seemingly helpful, relevant, practical ideas. You may have thought about 8 out of 10 because that's your job. You're a trade expert, you are Spanish, you know all of that. But there may be 2 aspects or 2 things you have not thought about. So that's where the great value lies. And then a final idea or use case is to understand complex policy changes, trends, and arguments. So I took here EU Matrix. Many of you would be familiar with it, or a couple of years ago it was called Vote Watch, but then Doru made this on his own. And EU Matrix tracks trends and voting patterns in the parliament, in the council. So they have a lot of useful data. And again, just for the sake of example, this is from a public report on representation of different MEPs from different countries. And I said, okay, based on the data, what unique trends can you detect from the statistics? And here's the twist, that are applicable for a Polish shipmaker company that wants to do EU lobbying. So I not only try to analyze the data, but I'm already putting the use case on top of it as an extra layer. So to say, okay, that's great that you give me insights, but I need that for that Polish shipmaker who happens to be my client, right? So you take it to the next level of not just analyzing, but applying it for a specific case. So with these examples and the message I've already mentioned in some form is that when you're using these tools, expect that it's going to take you 80% of the solution. The 20% is your analysis, your tweaking, the wording, the style, all those, you can add that. So that means your expectations should not be benchmarked at perfection. And many of you mentioned the style of the output wasn't very good. Well, you can feed in a sample writing style, report, a style guide, what have you, to say, take that as a basis or as a baseline, replicate that in your answer, right? So you should be able to teach it, to train it, to guide it as if it were your trainee or your intern, because then the output will be far, far better. And before I hand it back to Jacques for a couple of closing remarks, I just wanted to caution you about certain things. And here's a silly example, but there is a certain point I want to make with it, which is I asked ChatGPT, how many letter R does the word terrestrial have? The same example was done with strawberries, no matter. First, it got it right. It's got 3. And then I said, are you sure? And it says, oh, you're right to double check. Actually, it has 2. And I asked again, are you sure? Well, I'm sure this time it has 2. And then I said, okay, show me all the R's in the word. And then it told me, okay, 3rd, 4th, and 8th position in the word is an R, meaning it identified the places, so it realized that there was a mistake. What am I saying here is the hallucination or poor results are a thing, but you can counteract with a couple of techniques. And one is you just provide better data in the prompt. Now, in the previous example, that probably wouldn't be possible, but an earlier example, as you saw, that I did provide certain input about the Spanish farmers and other things. The second, I can instruct it to say, browse the web. One of you mentioned earlier as a frustration or as a negative point that there's an information cutoff, which was until around 2023. This is probably going to be fixed at one point or improved. But right now, GPT is not very up to date. But you can instruct it to browse the web and pick up the information it finds. Now, it's always better that you feed in the right information directly, whether as a PDF. Sometimes you can even provide a link, but the way websites are structured, often it's not that obvious or easy for the tool to properly pick up the information just by using a link. So you're best off if you provide that directly. And you can provide a certain knowledge base, whether it's your Excel sheet, whether a document or other. Now, to Jacques' earlier point, obviously you'll be very careful about the sensitivity and the confidentiality of the data, but there are certain things you can do, as mentioned before. And then finally, the most helpful practical way is to say, give me the page number and the line in where, or the line where a certain reference or quote or information is in the background PDF. And then it's going to say, okay, in the Draghi report on page 248, the following reference was made. Or I drew the following conclusion from page 42, paragraph 3. Right? And then you can cross-check it and you can be absolutely sure that it's not hallucinating, that you're not going to send to a client some report about something that simply doesn't exist. And then a final bit here is not to be afraid of experimenting and using it. And with a nice quote or scary, nice, helpful quote, AI will not replace your job, but someone using AI will. In a consultancy world, perhaps AI is not going to replace consultants, but some other consultancies using AI may win tenders and other assignments. And not to use GPT specifically as Google, at least not right now. There is perplexity. There's still a good old Google and many other tools. It's not very good at information retrieval. There are better tools for that. And ultimately, not to trust it fully. Trust, but verify. And to take away a couple of points where, as you have seen so far, that the tool, especially ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, Sonnet, and a couple other tools, they're all very eager to please you. So they want to give you answers and want to give it fast. Now, you can slow them down artificially to give you higher quality responses just by simply saying carefully analyze. or take your time, which is a very funny formulation to give to a machine, but you can still do that because it's going to take a couple of extra nanoseconds analyzing the data. And it's smart because it's very capable on the processing level, but it's ignorant because it knows the large and general data set. It doesn't know your own individual data set. So you can counteract that by feeding that in the right way. And the final bit here is the prompting part. So making sure that your prompt is clear, it's concise, it's effective, so you reach the result, the desired result, to the degree that it's helpful to you, that it really adds extra value to what you need. And it's really ultimately about asking better questions. So really finding the right question. And some of you may have seen, I put this idea on my LinkedIn. Like Jacques said earlier, we're pretty prolific when it comes to publishing on LinkedIn, things we discover and experiment with, is you can even ask ChatGPT to help you ask a better question. So this is a very meta way of getting better results, but to say, I want to organize a reception in the European Parliament. I'm not sure what I need to think about to make that a good PR event for my client. Help me realize what I may not know, right? So I basically verbalized what I don't know, and then it's going to give you various pointers of what you can think about that you can then turn it into a prompt or just simply do as you wish. And as an example for that, you could say, what are the 2024 priorities of the EU? Do these affect wine producers? So I'm very Spanish mood. So again, wine and olives and sunshine. How can you turn that into a better prompt? Well, first you can go to Perplexity and look for the 2024 work programs summary, or just very simply download that, the original as a PDF, upload that into ChatGPT. And then you prompt it to say, based on the attached document copied above, particularly concerning climate and digitalization, what does it mean for Spanish wine producers? So you see a very concrete use case. First, take the data, analyze the data, apply it for a specific use case. So as a final bit, and Jacques, then you will jump in with one or two questions. I see you're diligently answering many of those, where we're available for workshops. If you'd like to take that further or make it adapted to your team, we are happy to be invited as speakers to take speaking engagement and consultancy to guide you how to leverage these wonderful tools to your advantage. So over to you, Jacques, a couple things that you have seen, you have answered. I'm sure you can.
Yeah, there's been some interesting conversations about the quality of responses, the different tools. So really interesting to see. Maybe a question here. Why does ChatGPT always come up with long and heavy sentences to sound smarter? I always need to trim down the output. Is there a way to improve the prompt? Do you have any tips on that, Andras?
Yes, just very simply, you actually give in the prompt a constraint. So say, make your answer 2 paragraph long, make it 5 bullet long, make it succinct, make it whatever format you like it, but you need to instruct it, because otherwise it will always default to its best guess or statistically most probable guess. So you just need to say what you want. Any other question there?
Yes, if we had to give a quick list of all the tools mentioned.
Yes, I mean, we're going to put that in the follow-up notes, and we'll share the recording and some of the resources. So we're happy to do that. Sure.
And I think that's it.
Yes, well, there's one more thing that we'd be very grateful to hear your feedback. There's a form we'll ask you to fill out, just a minute or two, maybe not even, because that will help us to see where the needs are, how you perceive this today's webinar, which I trust was helpful. We tried to make it practical and make it very operational, so to say, and adapt that for the specific use case of public affairs consultants.
Did you want to say anything about the website, or did you already do that?
Yeah, I mean, basically the website, you're welcome to check it out. You can sign up for the newsletter we have, and we put many of the resources there, many of the videos we put out there. So we're trying to build there a knowledge base that you can resort to. And of course, if you're interested in getting in touch with us, we're more than happy to oblige. Voila.
Perfect. Well, thank you everyone for joining the session, and I hope this was helpful, valuable information for you. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. We're, as Andres said, very diligently active on LinkedIn, so that would be a pleasure to connect with you. And I hope to see you for another session or another workshop.
Wonderful. And of course, whatever we send out to you, you can share that with colleagues and teams, and that is perfectly fine, unless otherwise indicated. So with that, a big thanks to Raquel, who was there in the back helping make this a success. And thank you so much for being here. Have a nice weekend, and hope to continue the conversation.
Thank you. Bye.